Let's move over to the Mountaineers of West Virginia. Bill Stewart was interim head coach 2 years ago, led them to the big bowl win over Oklahoma, and he took over last year. One face that won't be there that we're used to seeing is Pat White.
Jared Brown, 6'4", 220, big guy, strong arm. He can run as well. He may not be Pat White, but they say down there in Morgantown, he's a pretty good guy. So I'm anxious to see this guy out there play. One thing he does have in his favor, he has the great back Noel Devine, 1,300 yards last year, 4.3 speed, lights out in the passing game and return game.
Noel Devine, he comes back. He wants to have a big season. Problem is, only one returning starter on the offensive line. That's big questions. Jock Sanders, another playmaker at receiver. When it comes to their defense, they get a guy named Reed Williams back to play middle linebacker, and they got a good defensive lineman in Scooter Barry.
And with a good defensive line, is going to open up a lot of plays for that secondary. Brandon Hogan, the cornerback, real good guy. He can get his hands on a lot of balls. So he's going to be another good player for those guys on the Mountaineer defense.
They played a 3-3-5 defense, but they're trying to implement a whole new era here with a bunch of freshmen. Eugene Smith, the quarterback, Tavon Austin, wide receiver, and Logan Heasty, Dion Long also, and Chris Snook, the tight end. So they're trying to implement a little more freshness in that after Pat White and a couple others leave. And keep in mind, Coach Holliday from Florida, John Doc Holliday, he's the associate head coach there, so look for them to bring the special teams that Florida used to bring to West Virginia. They draw Auburn, they're at Auburn versus Colorado, and their two big games are at USF and at Rutgers.
Yeah, they have a tough road schedule. That's the only reason why I don't see West Virginia topping the Big East, because of that tough road schedule. But you never want to count out the Mountaineers. They're a pesky team that can come to play each week and week in, week out. So you never want to count them out. But with that tough road slate, especially starting off at Auburn, that's key in that division.
The winner of the Big East last year that loses 10 starters on defense, the Cincinnati Bearcats, they go to the the BCS Bowl and disappoint. They lose to Virginia Tech. Brian Kelly, only in his third year, doing a great job at the Bearcats, but he let his defensive coordinator go to USF, Joe Tressie, and it's going to be a whole new. Their offense is there. They got Tony Pike, who led them very far last year, and they got the receivers. Vidal Hazelton transferred from USC, Marty Gilliard, and Marcus Barnett, and a JUCO named Jamar Howard. So the receivers and offense will be there. Question marks on defense, though.
That's the biggest thing. Like, you return 7 starters, but you lose 3 guys that went in the draft. And I like Tony Pike on offense. He has Marty Gilliard, who I think reminds me a lot of Isaac Bruce coming out of Memphis. But I like their offense. The offense is going to be a lot of shootouts this year. They can get their defense to at least play 3/4 of the way they played last year. They'll be fine in Cincinnati. They'll be a team that sneak up on a lot of teams this season in the Big East.
They lose Connor Barwin and Mike Mickens, and they actually returned 3 returning starters.
3 returning starters. They lost 9 starters off defense. So that's tough. That's tough.
They're at Oregon State, and then later in the year they host Illinois, which is a decent non-conference schedule. But they got at Rutgers, and they play USF and Pitt. Those are going to be big games for them. Can they come out two out of those 3? Probably not.
I just don't see it. It's a tough call right there in Cincinnati.
Randy Edsall heads he's one of the most underrated coaches in America. He's now in his 11th year at UConn. And, of course, a bunch of guys drafted off this team. Donald Brown goes. 2 guys underrated in the second round go. Cody Brown, the defensive end, and Darius Butler, the cornerback, and William Beatty. So this team lost a lot. Zach Frazier's their quarterback. Andre Dixon will replace Donald Brown. And they do get an offensive lineman back who was injured after their first game of the season, Alex Lay Magdalene, which should help them out.
And their defense, they have some talent on the defensive side of the ball. One thing you have to do on offense is replace Donald Brown. Whoever they can find to carry the load, that's a big load. He rushed for 2,000 yards last year. That's going to be tough. Defense, they return Scott Luders. They also have the free safety. He's a linebacker. They also have the free safety, Robert Vaughn. So they have some talent on defense, and that's going to keep them in a lot of games, especially within the conference.
The 3 linebackers are back, and as you mentioned, Robert Vaughn, who is second-team All-Big East. And to replace Brown, it's going to be Josh Todman, who's a sophomore, and, of course, Andre Dixon, who's a senior. They need to step up because Donald Brown was a great back. They're at Ohio. Then they host UNC, and they're at Baylor, out of conference, and Notre Dame.
That's a tough schedule. At Baylor used to be a cupcake, but Baylor is going to be tough this year. And you get North Carolina to come up. That's a good game. They played each other last year, I believe, and so it's a tough game. North Carolina is going to pretty much beat these guys, but that's one tough. They have a tough schedule at UConn. It's going to be. I think they might not make a bowl this year because they had 2 years of two consecutive winning seasons, but this might be a tough year up there in UConn.
Absolutely. I mean, Connecticut. At least they schedule. They
schedule tough.
Give them the credit for at least scheduling.
And keep an eye on Jasper Howard, cornerback at UConn. He's a real good player too.
And as you mentioned, Baylor down there, they got some weapon down there. I don't know what their quarterback's name is. Some
Griffin.
guy, yeah.
Yeah, who heard of him, right?
Yeah, who heard of him. Louisville, 5-7 last year. They returned 13 starters. Steve Kragthorpe, they're talking. He's on the hot seat. He also does the JUCO way. He's bringing in 5 JUCOs. And Victor Anderson, Rookie of the Year in the Big East last year. He's their tailback who heads their offensive front.
Victor Anderson, if you haven't seen him play, watch him play. He's a real good running back. I like him. He sees every hole. He has acceleration through the hole. He has great balance. I like Victor Anderson. He's a real good prospect for those guys. My question is, who's going to play quarterback? They have to find a quarterback to replace Hunter Cantwell.
Matt Sims transfers.
So they need a quarterback. Good thing about it, though, they do return the top 3 wide receivers, but that's the problem on offense. No quarterback.
Doug Beaumont and Trent Guy, 2 of those receivers, both second-team All Big East last year. And the offensive line, they lose George Bussey and first-round pick, who's a center, Eric Wood.
Mm-hmm. And without an offensive line, whoever's back there, quarterback, is going to struggle. Let's just hope Victor Anderson doesn't get beat up too bad.
John, on the defensive side of the ball, John Dempsey, middle linebacker, was second-team Big East also. And they lose three defensive backs who started. I'm sorry. 3 defensive backs were injured last year. They were starters. Now they're healthy, so defensive back might be a plus in this.
Defensive back might be a strength. Problem is they can't stop the run. If they don't improve their rush defense, everyone had a field day rushing the ball on Louisville. But that's been the common theme. Even when Petrino was there and John L. Smith, they really didn't have defense. Like, you have to have defense, especially in a conference like the Big East, where teams run and throws a good balanced conference. Mm-hmm. You have to have defense, and they had trouble on defense last season.
You're going to play in Connecticut and New Jersey, in Pittsburgh when it's 30, 20 degrees out, sometimes raining. So play some defense. That's how you win the division.
And they have a tough schedule on the road. They look at they at Kentucky, they're at West Virginia, they're at Utah. That's a tough slate for a team that gave up 29 points a game now.
They host Southern Miss, which won't be a yawner either.
Not even.
Let's move over to the Syracuse Orangemen, where Doug Marrone, the former offensive coordinator of the New Orleans Saints, takes over as head coach up there in Western New York, and a former Duke basketball player will be their quarterback this year. That's Greg Paulus, and he gets a wide receiver back, a stud who was suspended last year, Mike Williams.
Mike Williams is a real good prospect. He's 6'2", 204, solid frame. He catches everything with his hands. Unfortunately, he plays at Syracuse. If he was anywhere else in the country, you'd hear this guy, but this guy is a real good player on a bad team.
Arthur Jones anchors at defensive line.
Big nose tackle. I love Arthur Jones. He's a nasty player, physical. It always takes 2 people to block him. This is a guy that's going to get some looks from the NFL this year. In the postseason. He's a real good player.